Mother-Daughter-Duo-Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mother-Daughter Duo Podcast. I am your host, Danielle Perkins.
And I am her mother, Jean Perkins.
As well as co-host. And this episode is sponsored by M5 Mommy Monday Morning Motivation Meetup. For more information, please review the information or the screen down below. I want to open up with a Mother May I question. Mother, may I please ask you this question?
You may.
Okay. How are we as single mothers with no help supposed to go back to school? And then I want to go to school full time so I can finish sooner, but I wouldn't be able to work. How are we supposed to pay our bills and get by if there is no income? Any and all advice accepted. Again, this is a time or a segment where I take a question from a Facebook group, but also if you want to email your questions to us or send us a message on our Facebook group, the information will be listed. We're happy to review your questions online and share them with each other as well as our viewers and listeners as well. So going back to the question, how are we as single mothers with no help supposed to go back to school?
I understand her question. I am right. I understand her question. I can't say that enough because that was a decision that I had to make when I'm military and things were set up for me, I would say, for military, right? You know, I was in a military environment. My circle was military. So, you know, you had women there that their husbands were military. So then they would babysit. So that environment was very structured for me. And I always knew where my children were going to go while I was at work, you know, doing the military thing. I'm in military day and daycare. But when I finally got out, made a sacrifice and said I wanted to get out, one of the things I wanted to do was go to school. And it just was not designed for me to go to school, and I had to make sacrifices. And so I made a decision that I would not, finally I made a decision that I would not work. At some point I made the decision. I remember.
Okay, advise her.
Okay, but I'm telling her I understand.
We're going to ask you more. The topic is sacrifices and compromises. So
I had to make, my sacrifice was I did not go to school right away. I had to make decisions on a certain age that you guys were when I could go. My sacrifices was I didn't work and I just went to school.
But I just don't want you to expound on it just yet because that's the whole premise of the conversation. I don't want you to take away from what we're talking about.
You know what? You got to pick the right time. So that's the answer. Pick the right time. Sometimes you have to sacrifice, and if you can't go to school right now and you have to wait until the appropriate time when you know your children are able to be at home alone, if you don't have help, those are sacrifices you have to make.
Additionally, there are options like on school nowadays. Virtual learning online. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, sometimes you just have to be flexible, unfortunately.
And that's good because those were not options that were available to me 20 years ago. So you're 35. So, you know, 30 years ago, virtual learning was just not an option for me. So, and your brother is 30, you're 35. That just was not an option. I just made a sacrifice and I'm like, I'm not going to work. I want to go to school when they go to school.
You're making it personal.
And I'm just giving you my experience.
Okay, yes. I love you for giving your experience, but don't take away from the substance of our
I'm not going to take away. I'm done.
Your advice, in short, as you've already stated, is do it at the time when the time permits.
Right. I think you have to be very unselfish to make that decision. You have to think about what's best for your children. And if it means that you are not to go to school right then, you have to be okay with that.
And the reason why I wanted to do sacrifices and compromises, I'll give you a little backstory. So we haven't shared with many people that we're doing this podcast or filming a podcast right now for personal reasons. But we kind of just want everything. We want to build a cachet before we kind of release episodes because I'm pregnant. So that's the personal reason. And I told my brother, I was kind of like anxious and wanting to kind of share with someone. And I told my brother that we're doing this podcast, and he's not very receptive, but as he's getting older, he's, having greater conversations with me, which I love and appreciate. So he was asking me, well, how is that going? How is your perspective of how things are going? And he knows my mother and I very personally. Like I said, it's only really been us our entire lives up until the point that my cousin moved out here and until I had my son. So it's really been us, just the three out here in the state of Washington, because of the military brought my mother out here. So he knows us very intimately. And I'm going to have him on to do an exclusive show from his perspective of what it was like as the man of the house, growing in the house of two women. But obviously with that, and me being the daughter and my mom having a lot of back and forth, a lot of bickering. I don't know if it's because we have the same personalities or just that resistance that sometimes you get with a mother and a daughter. And, girls tend to be more independent a lot earlier on. So I don't know if there was a lot of that. I can tell you where I think it comes from, but I'll leave that for another episode. But my brother basically was saying, I think this would be great for you too, because there's a lot of things that you need to unpack. And Danielle, I don't think you really realize how much mom has sacrificed. And he could be right. I don't necessarily, it's not as I'm totally oblivious to it, but I feel like there was never an opportunity for me to get my points across. And I've been suppressing a lot of things for so long that sometimes any opportunity that I talk about anything with my mom, I make sure that those things come to the surface. So I say that to say, Mom, this should be a segment where you talk a little bit about the sacrifices and compromises that you had to make as a single mom, because I've never given you that opportunity, or we've never divulged or had that conversation. So to be fair to you, I think we should talk about this, and what a better place to do that than on the podcast. So I do know two things that were very important to you that you made big sacrifices on, where you told me that you wanted to be a commentator. You were very into sports.
Sportscaster.
Oh, sportscaster.
Mm-hmm.
You were very into sports, very specifically Chicago Bulls. She had this thing for Michael Jordan. She had a whole
not just the whole Chicago. I love, he was.
You had a thing for chocolate, ball-headed Michael Jordan.
Well, yeah, but
you had the license plate.
Team.
You had back then it was VHS tapes. You had the VHS tapes. You had the
It wasn't because
towel.
of him. It was the Bulls, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant.
Okay.
The whole team. Yeah, because I'm from Chicago. So, yeah, it wasn't Michael Jordan.
Excuse me, my bad. Okay, so you wanted to be a sportscaster.
Commentator, sports commentator.
And then school,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think the reason why you didn't go to school was because probably more so me than anything. I just was that problem child. I think at that time I was having to go to Job Corps, or I don't know, what prevented you from, what was the biggest barrier to you going to school?
Making sure I always had the mentality that I had my children, and my children are my responsibility. So me wanting to go to school, I knew that I would have to leave my kids with somebody for daycare. And I just didn't want to do that again.
Okay.
And so that's why I sacrificed for a long time, for a couple of years, not to go to school. And then when I did, I said I wanted to go to school when my kids were in school. So I sacrificed not working, getting on public assistance after I got out of the military. My public assistance was like $500. And at that, this is how long ago it was. Rent was $535 From DSHS, I got $545. So I was able to pay rent and have $10 left over.
I want to talk about another segment. How did you budget $535?
And then I was getting food stamps, and then I would go to the
WIC.
When I did my military weekends once a month, that would be like $100 a month extra.
I think you said two in another episode.
It might have been $100 to $200 a month. And so I would use that as just like my money to pay my light bill and just a little cushion. And I would get my student grants or whatever. And I would pay up on my light bill. I'd pay up on my pager because I didn't have no cell phone. So I pay up on my pager. And those are sacrifices.
The student grants?
Yeah,
Well, where did the student grants come from if you didn't go to school?
I went to school eventually, but first I'm saying I did not go to school, and I waited until I forget how old you guys were. It was back in the 90s when I first got out of the Army, and you guys were in school. So when you guys were in school in the early 90s, I was in school. And I made sure I was in school, and you guys were in school. I didn't want to do no night school. I didn't want to do any of that. And so I'm just saying I sacrificed financially not having a decent income so that I could go to school. And I would use my grant money to pay up on my student loan. To pay up on my, whatever bill I might have. Because I knew I didn't have no income coming in. So I would pay like 2 months in advance until the next school check.
I didn't realize that. I thought the most recent time, I know you went to Pierce.
And then eventually I quit because you were failing in school.
I thought you quit because of me.
I went to Pierce and I went to the University of Washington. That's when I quit, when I was going to University of Washington, because I would go up there after I dropped y'all off. And I would catch the bus up there or sometimes drive to University of Washington in Seattle. But my kids were flunking out of school. They were not doing well in school, so I just quit school. And then,
just stay right there and stay in that pocket for a little bit. Like, what was that reality for you? Like, why would you say that? I don't want to go too deep into, like, why you think we were failing in school, because that can go for, another whole topic, another day. But just coming to that, making that sacrifice and having that mindset to say, because some parents would not necessarily stop going to school because their kids are failing in school. Like, some parents would say, I need to make sure that I get these credentials so that I can have better income in order for me to do better for my kids and my family in the long run. But what was that realization like in that moment to say, I have to put my kids' needs before myself?
Well, I wasn't angry about it. I just realized that this is a choice I have to make, and I had to do it for the betterment, for the sake of being home with my kids. Like, I didn't, sometimes you just make decisions and you don't have time to process it. Since we've been doing this, all of your questions in regards to me have always included me and my thought process. And I think you want me to have answers, and I don't have the answers that you want to hear.
No, we're just on the platform where we're supposed to have dialogue. But, okay.
No, right. But I think you still expect me to have answers and think that I have processed certain answers in my mind. What were you thinking about? What was your thought process when you had to do that? And you have to understand I didn't have any thought process.
You had to have something to know to go left versus right.
Well, the only thing I can think of. So my thought process was, my kids are not doing well in the school, and I need to be at home with them. And now, not realizing just being at home was not the best outcome, right? Because I need to be involved. And I'm not mentally, I wasn't still there. So I was home, but you guys I'm sure you needed more from me, not just being home, but being involved. So I just made a conscious decision to not go to school so that you guys could somehow flourish in school, to be at home, to be a constant present at the house, and maybe that would help. That was what I made a decision to do.
And then my other question with that would be, like, there was a time where you were okay with, like, finding a babysitter to take care of us for the moment when you were going to work. So why didn't you do that when it came down to you going to school?
So the only job that I had,
The military.
was the military, and that was, that was the daycare then, and in that environment when you guys were younger. And the military, and I didn't think about going to school. You got to remember, now the military offered some schooling, but when I get off work, my mind was I'm burnt out. Mentally. I got the military on one hand, and then I got my kids, and I'm a single mom. So mentally, I'm burnt out. I couldn't have went to school if I wanted to. Yeah, I couldn't even conceive going to school. Yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to. When I knew I was getting out, I was like, I want to go to school and I want to do this. Now, the opportunity with the sportscasting happened when I was still in the military, because at that time I was with my sons, your brother's dad. And I had met and made connections with sportscaster here in Washington.
I did not know this.
Yeah, his name was Wayne.
I just always thought you were like a loud mouth.
No, I made connections with him and I wrote him and
sports.
Emailed him. I love sports, and I went to a game one time when the Supersonics weren't in their building up in Seattle, and they came and they played down at the Tacoma Dome. I went to a game set with all the sportscasters. I was with Wayne Brady. If anybody knows Wayne Brady, he was a heavyset sportscaster for Channel 7.
Not Wayne Brady. We know as the loud black dude.
Okay, so, and I might be saying his name. His name was Wayne, and he's a sportscaster for Channel 7. And I said Wayne Brady, that's what came up. But it might be Wayne Cody. I can't think of his name. But anyway, he's a heavyset.
Wayne Brady from Dancing with the Stars,
yeah, no,
and from
not
that
him.
late night show,
Not
and
him.
from the game show I forget he used to
This
do.
was a heavyset Caucasian man that's a sportscaster for Channel 7. Wayne Cody. I think his name is Wayne Cody.
I have no idea if you're looking.
So I made connections with them and went to some games and stuff. But at the same time, I knew it would take me continuing to do that. I would have to do it after
what was
work.
the proposition? Or
I would have to kind of do a little, go to school and then kind of intern after work. I couldn't do that and I had kids. Because my thing was, my kids are already going to be with a teacher all day or in daycare all day. And it's not fair for them to come home and then be with a babysitter at night. I didn't want to do that.
Some of the sacrifices I think in general that single moms have to make is their time and sleep, their goals and their dreams, finances, their love life, their personal needs. Do you want to, anything else you want to speak to on the sacrifices?
I would say all of those are correct.
But in your personal life, talk more about finances, how you had to sacrifice your finances. First of all, you said you were on a very tight budget of $535, upwards of maybe about $800 a month with the additional income that you had. And what it was like to, I know some families or single moms have to sacrifice in terms of finances when it comes to, I've heard stories of, if I get something on the McDonald's menu, we almost have to split it, that type of sacrifice. Was it like that for you, or?
Yeah, long as I made the initial, paid everything that needed to be paid, like rent, and at that time I think I had a car. I did have a car. I went to the auction and bought me a little raggedy car and a little Chevy Chevette, and you had to hold it. It was a hatchback, and I had to hold it up with a stick. I bought it from a car, what you call them things? Where you bid on it.
You already said auction.
Auction. I got it at an auction, yeah. And so I drove around in that for a while. A lot of sacrifices that I made.
So not being able to get the type of car that you would want. Is that
Well,
what
you
you're
get,
saying?
I'm just giving you that wasn't a material thing that bothered me as far as, as long as I had a car to drive and get you guys where I needed to go. I never wanted to be without a car and be walking somewhere. Finally, and then dating maybe, I just didn't want to bring different men, even though sometimes I might have tried it. My whole thing was I didn't want to bring different men over my children. I didn't want my daughter to think that it was okay to have different men over her. Because then, children...
It didn't work. I dated a lot in my young adult life.
But that was different.
Season.
Yeah. And, and you weren't disrespectful. I mean, you dated. There's a difference between what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so my thing was...
You did not have like a revolving door of different
No, I
men
didn't want
coming
no...
out. Like I can count on maybe, except for my brother's dad and my dad, maybe 3 other people.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe
while
not
we were
3,
children.
right? Maybe.
Yes.
I
said them before. One starts with an R, one starts with an A.
I don't know that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a bad one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the R. And then who's the other one?
Now, I don't remember the one.
Okay, so it was only 2. Yeah, bad decisions, but still consistent because I did not, because I'm thinking these would lead to relationships when you said the A, but that didn't. That led to me hiding now.
Hiding now? Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
Yeah, when he come knocking on the door, I was hiding. I was like, So yeah, but I didn't want to bring a lot of, because children model what they see. So I didn't want my son to think that it would be okay to be with a lot of different women, and that he would think it would be okay. And I didn't want you to see that.
Well, why
either.
couldn't you just have a little...
There was one gentleman, he was in the Army, he was an officer, and I dated him for a while, and we would meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would come or knock on... There's only one time he came and knocked on the door to pick me up, but other than that, we would meet. And so I dated him for a while. And that's how I wanted things to go. If I'm going to date you, I'm going to date you outside of my home. You're not going to be around my kid. You have to pay attention too. I remember I was interested in a gentleman, military guy. And he kept talking about you. He didn't meet you. He hadn't met you. He just knew I had a daughter. And here I am, a full-grown
woman with
shapely woman with all the parts, and you keep talking about meeting my daughter. I stopped talking to him because it made no sense to me, and I was not bringing him up in my home because I just kind of sensed something wasn't right there. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. That's so sweet. Some women, unfortunately, do not have that mindset.
They don't have that mindset. Some people
it's more important to just be loved in that moment, and those are one of the things that you chose to make a sacrifice on.
Yeah, some women would rather have a piece of a man than, have a whole man. So they will sacrifice everything, all of their morals and everything just to have a piece of a person.
I was trying to be sweet and tactful with it.
They wouldn't. No, they would rather have a piece of a man in their life than sacrifice and not have none at all and expose their child to some of everything.
I think some compromises that you make in as a single parent are relationships, and not necessarily meaning love life relationships, but like your friends. Sometimes I notice that when you have children, all of your single friends who don't have children kind of fade to the back because they don't relate to you as much anymore, or you don't have the type of time to entertain their nonsense or clubbing or going out all the time, although it's good to have a personal life. I recognize that sometimes you have to make some compromises on the relationships, or relationships that are not necessarily good for you. You make compromises on your own happiness. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. That seems very harsh. When I wrote that down, I'm like, your happiness, but I think it's true. Like, your personal needs, which is tied to your direct happiness, will sometimes have to take a back seat to
Right.
your children.
That's true.
Your social life, I know that one thing you probably didn't stop doing right away was going out clubbing. Like, that was a thing you used to do. Like, I hear you talk about the NCO club back in that day a lot. The
Yeah,
NCO
but I didn't
club.
do that a lot. I didn't do that until y'all got to be teenagers.
I remember a picture of you in like a maybe a black bodysuit in your straw chair.
Yeah, I
With your
think that
leg
might
all
have been in
crossed,
Germany.
with your curvy stuff. Oh, you weren't doing that with Auntie Bunny out here? Sorry, Auntie Bunny, to put you on the spot.
Yeah, we went, but you guys were teens by the time me and Bunny and Alicia at the time and Lisa, when we all used
Put
to
them
go
all
out.
on the spot.
They were now they were dating. Lisa was dating, and Alicia was married to Vincent. But we just went out. That's all we were doing. We went out having a good time.
Oh, okay. And then other compromises I think that you have to make, or you do make when you're a single parent, is the rules that you sometimes want to enforce. Like, sometimes you realize, like I said, your child, if you recognize your child just has, like for me, you probably had a lot of ideas about the way things should go, but I was just so determined as a very outspoken Taurus woman. I feel like I had independence a long time because you were working and my dad was nowhere to be found. So I feel like I probably had a lot of independence a lot earlier, and I kind of had to fend for myself a lot earlier. And that probably is where we had a lot of static. But I think that the compromise was sometimes you want to enforce rules, but you just have to recognize that my child also does have an opinion and they're a person of their own. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Well, I mean, I should have agreed as far as when I say you have an opinion, it's important to let your children develop their own opinions. And I shouldn't be so hell-bound on them, just under having my mindset, But that's not how I thought at the time as a mother. Not having... what I say is you do a lot of research. You do a lot of research into the importance of, developing a child from the mental health field, which is very important. That's just not the time. That's just not where I came from. So I was, I guess you could say, hell bent on you guys thinking the way I think instead of helping you to develop. So you were hell bound on the way that you think, and I was trying to be hell-bound on the way that I think, and it just
Hence, I went to Job Corps at 16 years old. And then another compromise I think that you have to make as a single mother is your relationship with the child's father. I don't think you made a lot of compromises there, but I think the reason why it's important is like in my situation, is that you do have to give some wiggle room because one thing that you have taught me, although not directly about the relationship with a child's father, is just you kind of remain neutral, or you try to keep an open mind, or you try to take the more mature way out. And so when I say compromises with the child's father, it's like I'm more like, I just don't need this headache, so you can exit stage left and I'll take care of everything from here. I don't necessarily feel like I need to tell you anything, involve you in anything, go seek any additional support. I will just handle it because that's easier. But that's just not the reality. They have a right to have a say if they want to be involved, whatever level of involvement that is. And so I have to try to be the mature person to keep that kind of open mind frame.
Yes, always.
So those I think are some of the compromises and sacrifices that you make as a single mother. Do you want to say anything else to close us out from this episode?
As you talk about that, and when you talk about, the child not being, not coming from a two-parent home and you being a single mother and wanting the child's father involved, just make sure, a lot of women are hurt behind the father not being involved. And so what I would encourage the single mom to do is to be open to allowing the father to be involved in the child's life if they want to. You don't have to have an opinion. You don't have to talk negative about that child's father. Let the father be involved in the child's life. It is very important. If he doesn't, it'll never come back on you that you did not allow it. It should never come back on you that you did not have an open door to that. Because, sometimes you withhold that relationship because you're trying to hurt the person that hurt you, when in all actuality, you are hurting the child. So please don't let the child pay for your anger and pay for a dysfunctional relationship that you had anyway, but you still wanted to go into it because I know that there were signs, but you still wanted to be in that relationship. And now you want to and the child was created, and now you want the child ends up paying for your poor decision. So please make sure if he wants to be involved at whatever level, as long as it's not disrespectful to you and it's not harming the child, let the father be involved in the child's life. I'm telling you, it'll be so much better for the both of you, and especially for the child. Think of the child first. You got to think of the children first.
And in closing, I don't think we did a mommy moment, but something to leave off on a positive note. What's your mommy moment for the week?
Let the father be involved in the child's life.
What does this have to do with mommy moment? She's really trying to reiterate that. I think because you wouldn't. Okay, my mommy moment. I think this is why you're stressing this. My mommy moment is in front of my mom. I did have a blow up for the first time ever with my child's father. Is that why you're stressing?
No. No, because I don't think you're doing a bad job at that. So no.
Well, no, that was my.
Yeah, you did. You had a moment, but.
Okay, my mommy moment was just that. And I said we were leaving off on a positive note, but here I go being negative. But my mommy moment was just that I just kind of had my blow up. I was at my wit's end. So it spewed where I was trying to be very contained. My child's father missed calling his son on his birthday, and all of those things kind of just compounded on each other, that I just had a blow up when he finally came over, which I think caused him a lot of embarrassment and shame because he left abruptly. So that was my very raw and vulnerable moment.
And you're allowed to have that. And mothers, you are allowed to have that. Okay?
Yeah. That was my mommy moment in closing. But I think that we are now back we're texting. So we're trying to be amicable and very true indeed that you're allowed to have those moments. It's not always easy, but making sure you try to come back to the child and what's important for the child.
Right. That's all.
Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mother-Daughter Duo podcast. Again, my name is Danielle, and this is my mother, Jean. Be blessed.
Be blessed. Have a good day.
Mother-Daughter Duo podcast.